Hello, everyone. I'm Johnny. Welcome to Decoded. Our story takes place in Saxony, a state in northwestern Germany. It borders the Netherlands. Saxony is vast, and the second largest state in Germany. In the heart of Saxony lies a small town called Eschede. It belongs to the Cell district, situated between Hanover and Hamburg. The town is renowned for its rich history and beautiful natural scenery, making it a popular tourist destination. As Europe's largest economy, Germany boasts a powerful industrial sector. Its meticulous manufacturing processes have given birth to numerous brands, from small items like watches and screwdrivers, to large ones like cars and buildings. In June 1991, Germany completed its first high-speed rail line between Mannheim and Stuttgart. In the following years, high-speed rail developed rapidly, gradually covering major cities across the country. By 1998, Germany's high-speed rail network had been operating for 7 years. During this period, it maintained a flawless safety record and was considered one of the safest modes of transportation. However, an accident shattered this perception, forever changing public opinion. This was the Eschede train derailment. June 3, 1998. It was a Wednesday. The sun was shining, the sky a brilliant blue. A gentle breeze blew, rustling the leaves playfully. Everything seemed peaceful and serene. At 10:59 a.m., Mrs. Carl and her husband were enjoying their leisure time in their kitchen. They were residents of Eschede, living right next to the railway tracks. They sipped their coffee and chatted, discussing plans to renovate their garden. Suddenly, a tremendous crash erupted outside. Their entire house shook. Coffee cups tumbled from the table, and the windows shattered from the deafening roar. Terrified, Mrs. Carl thought it was an earthquake, but the noise quickly subsided, leaving an eerie silence. Her husband guessed a plane might have crashed nearby. But then, Mrs. Carl saw a train car through the window. She instantly realized that a train had derailed. Rushing outside, Mrs. Carl was stunned by what she saw. The 50-ton train car had crashed into her garden. Apart from the first 2 cars, which appeared relatively intact, the rest of the train was mangled and deformed. Groans emanated from within the wreckage. Living so close to the tracks, the train had come to rest, mere meters from their house. Had it gone any further, Mrs. Carl and her husband would have been killed. Regaining her composure, Mrs. Carl immediately contacted the police. What had caused this accident? How could this have happened? Let's rewind to earlier that morning. At 5:47 a.m., ICE train 884 departed Munich Central Station, bound for Hamburg. The train was an ICE-1 model, designed for comfort and a luxurious travel experience. To enhance passenger comfort, the standard 14-car configuration had been reduced to 12. The train had a power car at each end, with a maximum capacity of 703 passengers. It could reach speeds of up to 280 kilometers per hour, and was among the most advanced high-speed trains in the world. The slogan was, offering every passenger the experience of an airline's business class. The train's popularity soared after its launch, seen as a strong competitor to airline business class. One of its most attractive features was its dedicated dining car. Called the Board Restaurant, it had a raised roof and could accommodate 40 passengers. Staffed with attendants, passengers could enjoy a variety of cuisines. ICE 884 traveled from Munich to Hamburg, making stops in Augsburg, Nuremberg, Würzburg, Fulda, Kassel, Göttingen, and Hanover. The entire journey spanned 850 kilometers. Among the passengers was a man named Dittman, who was on vacation with his wife and young son. The family boarded the train in Nuremberg, the third stop, heading for Hamburg. The train's speed, comfort, and safety record made it their ideal choice. The Dittman family sat in the first car. His wife and son sat side by side, with him sitting opposite them. Along the way, they dreamed of their seaside vacation, discussing what they would eat when they arrived. They had planned this trip for a long time, and it was their first family trip to the beach. Everyone was excited. At 10:30 a.m., after 5 hours of travel, the train made a brief stop in Hanover. Then it continued north. There were 287 passengers on board, along with 6 crew members. They were 130 kilometers from Hamburg. If everything went smoothly, they would arrive in another 40 minutes. But then, something seemed to go wrong. As Dittman discussed travel plans with his wife, a loud bang suddenly echoed from somewhere. The train jolted, and a sharp piece of metal sliced through the floor. It shot up between his wife and son's seats, narrowly missing Dittman. The family was startled. His son burst into tears. His wife quickly comforted him. Dittman knew something was seriously wrong. If they didn't act quickly, the consequences could be dire. He told his wife and son to leave their seats and stand in the aisle. "Don't move," he said. He ran towards the rear of the train, searching for the conductor, although the other passengers were also startled by the bang and the sudden jolt. The train quickly regained its stability. They calmed down and remained seated. Soon, Dittman found the conductor in the third car. He frantically explained what had happened, urging him to stop the train and investigate. The conductor was dismissive. He insisted the train was safe. Even if there was a problem, he wasn't authorized to stop the train. Company regulations stated that in case of emergencies, he had to investigate the situation thoroughly. Only after confirming a fault and reporting to his superiors could he take further action. Dittman grabbed the conductor and pulled him towards the first car, wanting him to see the damage for himself. At 10:56 a.m., they arrived in the first car. Before they could inspect the damage, disaster struck. The train began to shake violently. Luggage tumbled from the overhead compartments. The train roared. Panic erupted among the passengers. They were terrified. Screams filled the air. Some passengers tried to break the windows, but the glass was too thick. They couldn't escape. The train was 6 kilometers south of Eschede. As the first 2 cars passed under a highway overpass, the third car derailed. It was flung from the tracks. Traveling at 280 kilometers per hour, it slammed into 2 concrete pillars supporting the overpass. The car was decimated. The front power car separated from the wreckage and continued for another 3 kilometers before finally stopping near Eschede station. Tragically, the impact caused the 300-ton overpass to collapse. The fourth car also derailed, passing under the bridge just before it fell. However, 2 railway workers were working on a nearby branch line. The fourth car struck them, killing them instantly. Due to its momentum, the fourth car continued moving until it finally stopped after hitting several trees. The fifth and sixth carriages were crushed directly by the collapsing highway bridge. The carriages behind collided one after another. In just a few dozen seconds, the rear carriages twisted and piled up. The immense pressure compressed these carriages into wreckage less than 30 meters long. 8 carriages were crushed to the length of a single one. The scene was a mess of devastation. 6 minutes after the incident, The first rescue team arrived at the scene. They immediately realized the severity of the accident. Reporters who arrived first captured photos of the derailed train. The photos show the highway bridge struck by the train had completely collapsed. The train itself was severely damaged. Effingussen was the first officer on the scene. He was patrolling near Eschede when he suddenly saw the collapsed bridge. He drove along a side road to the railway tracks. The scene before him was shocking. It was the most horrific accident he had ever seen. The carriages were crushed and twisted together. The entire highway bridge was gone. Debris from the collapsed concrete was everywhere, some of it on top of the carriages. The scene was a picture of utter devastation. Hundreds of passengers were trapped inside, waiting for rescue. The Dittman family in the first carriage were fortunate. They only suffered minor injuries. After Officer Effingussen arrived, Mr. Dittman climbed out of a broken window with his wife and child. The conductor also emerged with them. They appeared to be relatively unharmed and able to walk away. Mr. Dittman recounted the events to Officer Effingussen. He said he was lucky to have returned to the first carriage just before the accident. When the train derailed, he hit his head on the seat and blacked out. He woke up to see the conductor lying beside him. They checked on each other, and after confirming they were all right, he found his wife and son. Thankfully, they were both fine, with only minor injuries. The conductor expressed his gratitude to Mr. Dittman, saying, if he hadn't called him to the first carriage, he might not have survived. This train had been running for many years, without incident. It was unclear why such a serious accident had occurred. Because the train was made of reinforced aluminum alloy, the surface was extremely hard, making it very difficult to cut through, and hindering the rescue efforts. The first responders underestimated the severity of the accident and didn't have enough cutting tools. At 11:07 a.m., given the severity, the incident was upgraded to a major emergency. The fire chief ordered all available local equipment to be mobilized for the rescue. Meanwhile, Hanover dispatched 2 rescue helicopters to the scene. Dozens of fire trucks arrived soon after. Coincidentally, 37 emergency physicians were attending a medical conference in Hanover. Upon notification, they immediately suspended the conference and rushed to the accident site. To ensure prompt treatment, a temporary triage tent was set up. Critically injured individuals received immediate care, and once stabilized, were airlifted to hospitals. Those with minor injuries were sent to Eschede for treatment by local doctors. At 11:18 a.m., national rail ticket sales were halted. 7 minutes later, all train services were suspended. Officer Effingussen at the scene heard cries for help from the 11th carriage. He tried to break the window, but failed. He then called for rescuers with cutting equipment. After assessing the situation, they decided to cut through the roof. The rescue was urgent. Every second counted. To comfort the injured, Effingussen tried to communicate with the passengers inside through a gap, hoping to distract them and ease their pain. He learned the injured passenger's name was Botch, public company employee. He had boarded at Fulda. On his way to Hamburg on business, he had chosen a business class seat in the 11th carriage to work during the journey. He was working at his seat when he heard a loud bang, and the train started to shake. Shortly after, the train derailed. His legs were trapped under the seat. He couldn't move and was in excruciating pain. Paramedics passed strong painkillers through the gap. Botch was in so much pain that he took too many painkillers. The side effects soon caused him to lose consciousness. Fortunately, rescuers cut open the carriage shortly after he passed out. They worked together to remove the seat trapping his legs, and successfully rescued him. He was immediately taken to the tent for treatment, and then airlifted to a hospital. At 11:25 a.m., a preliminary count showed 40 fatalities, multiple serious injuries, and many still trapped. The rescue operation continued intensely. In the fifth carriage, rescuers found Schafflein lying inside. Her legs were severely injured and completely immobile. When rescuers asked about her condition, she claimed to be fine. Presumably from shock, she couldn't feel any pain. Schafflein had boarded at Würzburg, on her way to visit a longtime friend in Hamburg. She had chosen a gift days earlier, and if all went well, she would have arrived the day before her friend's birthday. But the train derailed. Rescuers cut open the window to get her out. However, the crushed carriage left very little space inside, not enough for two adults. After speaking with her, Schafflein decided to climb out herself. Despite her weakness, she pulled herself out inch by inch. With sheer willpower, she was then taken to the triage tent. By 1:45 p.m., medical personnel had treated over 80 injured individuals. Another 27 critically injured were airlifted to the city hospital. At 12:30 p.m., personnel from the regional emergency services, the fire department, and even the army arrived at the scene. Over 1,000 rescuers were present. They worked tirelessly, racing against time. It was uncertain how many people remained trapped, so they were determined to save as many as possible. As darkness fell, rescuers turned on floodlights and continued working. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, they wouldn't give up. The work continued late into the night. Some rescuers began to experience exhaustion, but they persevered, driven by the hope of finding survivors. They discovered the bodies of two more victims in the wreckage. They were railway workers who had been carrying out maintenance work on a nearby track and were tragically killed by the derailed carriages. For the next 2 days, rescuers continued their search relentlessly, but found no more survivors. On the morning of the third day, the rescue operation was officially called off. Exhausted rescuers collapsed on the ground. The 3-day ordeal had left them utterly drained. The final toll was 101 fatalities, including the 2 railway workers, and 88 injuries, over 60 of them serious. It became one of the deadliest rail accidents in German history. After the accident, all of Germany and the world were shocked. People couldn't believe that such a serious accident could happen to a train known for its safety. Some media outlets called it the German Titanic. Some people stated that they would never take a high-speed train again. To provide answers to the public, Germany formed an accident investigation team, determined to find out the truth. Investigators went to the scene to investigate. A witness, Mr. A, provided investigators with an important clue. He said he was driving that day and saw a white car ahead, driving very slowly on the overpass. Mr. A was in a hurry, so he sped up and passed it. After that, Mr. A saw in his rearview mirror the white car plunge off the overpass. Since stopping on the overpass was prohibited, Mr. A didn't stop to check. He later learned that a serious high-speed train accident had occurred there. He thought the white car falling onto the tracks might have caused it. When investigators surveyed the scene, they did find a mangled white car. However, the train's front showed no signs of colliding with another vehicle. Later, based on the white car's license plate, investigators learned why the car had been crushed by the train. Two railway workers were carrying out repairs on the tracks, and the car belonged to them. Witness Mr. A's testimony was incorrect. He may have been hallucinating. After the train derailed, the following carriages crashed into it. Both railway workers were killed. Since the train hadn't hit the car, what caused the accident? Just as the investigators were at a loss, Officer Effingussen contacted the investigation team and provided a key clue. He said he had met a survivor at the scene on the day of the accident, Dittman. From his conversation with Dittman, he learned that a steel plate had pierced the first carriage before the derailment. Effingussen suspected that this steel plate might have caused the accident. After receiving this clue, the investigators inspected the first carriage. They found a steel plate between two seats. It had pierced the carriage, with half of it still outside. 6 kilometers from the accident site on the tracks, damaged rails were discovered. There were clear signs of wear and tear. After comparison, investigators were surprised to find that the steel plate that pierced the carriage and the steel tire from the train wheel were made of the same material. Moreover, the rear wheel of the first carriage was severely damaged, with the tire completely detached. Therefore, it was determined that the steel plate that pierced the carriage was the tire from the wheel. After the wheel tire ruptured, half of it pierced the carriage, and the other half remained outside. During travel, the tire rubbed against the tracks, creating sparks and causing severe damage to the rails. However, this damaged wheel alone wasn't enough to derail the train. There was another reason. Soon, investigators made a new discovery. Based on the damage to the tracks, the train derailed about 200 meters from the overpass. This was precisely where two tracks converged. There were 2 sets of switches on the tracks to divert the train onto different lines. To smoothly guide the train onto other lines, a separate guardrail was installed during construction. Investigators found that one section of the guardrail was missing. The remaining guardrail also showed clear signs of breakage. Finally, the investigators found the real cause of the derailment. Before the accident, the tire of the first carriage's wheel ruptured. Due to the force, half of it pierced the carriage. The remaining part of the tire continuously rubbed against the tracks. When the train reached the first set of switches, the detached tire lifted one section of the guardrail. The immense impact caused the 2 rear wheels of the first carriage to leave the tracks. When the train passed the second set of switches, the 2 derailed rear wheels likely hit the switch, forcing the locomotive and the first carriage off the tracks. As the train continued, the following carriages also derailed. The third carriage crashed directly into the overpass pillar. The overpass, under the massive impact, began to collapse. This caused the fourth carriage, as it passed under the overpass, to be thrown clear, crashing into the railway workers repairing the tracks. The fifth carriage, immediately behind, was crushed by the collapsing overpass. The remaining carriages continued forward at their original speed, but the path ahead was blocked. This caused them to twist and pile up. Fortunately, 2 minutes before the accident, a train from the opposite direction had just passed under the bridge. This train arrived at that location 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Therefore, it didn't encounter the derailed train. If everything had gone according to plan, the 2 trains would have met there. The accident would have been even more devastating. Since its launch in 1991, the train had safely transported numerous passengers and maintained a flawless safety record. Yet this time a wheel tire detached, causing the train to derail. Such a serious accident. After a rigorous investigation and analysis, the results were in. This ICE-1 train, number 51, was a high-speed train launched by Deutsche Bahn. It symbolized Germany's advanced engineering technology. With a top speed of 280 kilometers per hour, it was one of the most advanced high-speed trains of its time. However, after the train went into operation, passenger reviews of the dining car were mixed. Perhaps initial expectations for the dining car were too high. Many found the experience didn't meet their expectations, leading to negative feedback. Some reported that the train was unstable while moving. Cutlery on the tables would occasionally shift during meals, making it difficult to eat comfortably. They were constantly worried about dropping their cutlery, and had to keep readjusting it. Sometimes they would even stain their clothes with the served food. The noise during the journey was also bothersome. They felt the train wasn't as comfortable as advertised. When Deutsche Bahn received negative feedback, to avoid damaging its reputation, it decided to address the issue quickly. After consultations with several railway experts, someone suggested rebuilding the tracks. However, this would be costly and time-consuming, making it impractical. Therefore, this proposal was rejected. Then, someone suggested modifying the train wheels, a more efficient solution. The train originally used single-layer wheels, which were robust and durable. However, the direct contact and friction between the wheels and the tracks generated significant noise. Also, these wheels lacked shock absorption, resulting in a bumpy ride and impacting passenger comfort. To improve the wheels, experts turned their attention to trams. Trams used double-layer wheels. A layer of rubber was added to the single-layer wheel, and another steel tire was added outside the rubber. This provided excellent shock absorption, resulting in a smoother ride and reduced noise. However, this wheel had a critical flaw. It was prone to metal fatigue. During operation, the train wheels had to bear tremendous weight and would undergo slight expansion and contraction. Although this deformation was minimal, over time, small cracks would appear in the outer steel tire, leading to metal fatigue. Without regular inspection and maintenance, rupture was likely. The problem was that trams used these double-layer wheels because they traveled at slower speeds. Compared to high-speed trains, trams were much lighter. Despite this flaw, the experts decided to use these double-layer wheels on the high-speed trains. They planned to inspect the wheels regularly after operation. After the new double-layer wheels were manufactured, engineers tested them and simulated the wheels running on the tracks. However, halfway through the testing, it was abruptly halted. The reason was the approaching summer tourist season. The trains had to be put into service immediately. But in reality, a month after the double-layer wheels were tested, some had developed small cracks. Unfortunately, the tests were only half completed. For various reasons, they were not continued. August 1992. Deutsche Bahn resolutely decided to use this new type of double-layered wheel to replace the original single-layered wheels. Sure enough, after this, the trains performed very well. Passenger feedback was very positive. The previous issues of bumps and noise were gone. July 1997. An accident occurred on a German tram. Upon investigation, metal fatigue was found in the tram's wheels. To resolve this issue, the only solution was to replace the wheels when cracks appeared. This accident sparked some discussion at the time, because many vehicles used this wheel design, including the ICE high-speed trains. However, Deutsche Bahn was unconcerned. They firmly believed their design was flawless and posed no safety risks. Their engineers, they claimed, would conduct rigorous and regular wheel inspections, using state-of-the-art metal fatigue detectors. Any issues would be addressed promptly. Given Deutsche Bahn's standard operating procedures, why did a wheel rim fracture still occur? Investigators visited Deutsche Bahn's maintenance department. They subsequently uncovered a critical issue. According to the engineers, they initially used professional metal fatigue detectors for inspections. However, they later discovered that the professional detectors frequently produced false alarms. Over time, they deemed the detectors unreliable. Crucially, using the detectors was time-consuming and inefficient. Since the double-layered wheels were implemented, the feedback had been positive, with no reported problems. So they resorted to using flashlights and relying on visual inspections. Each inspection was considered complete after a quick scan with a flashlight. Investigators were shocked by this revelation. They couldn't believe that trains carrying thousands of passengers daily were subject to such perfunctory maintenance checks. Visual inspections could only detect larger cracks, while smaller ones went unnoticed. Investigators interviewed surviving crew members. To gather information, they stated that 2 weeks before the accident, staff had reported potential wheel problems. They had notified their superiors about small cracks in the wheels. But to maximize operations, the company neither replaced the wheels nor arranged for professional inspections. Therefore, the accident was caused by multiple factors. Besides the design flaws in the wheels, there were also issues with standard operating procedures. This also prevented the train conductor from taking effective measures to prevent the tragedy. To avoid similar incidents, Deutsche Bahn, within 2 weeks, replaced all the wheels on its high-speed trains with traditional single-layered wheels. 4 years after the derailment, 2 Deutsche Bahn engineers and an employee from the wheel manufacturer were taken to court. The 3 were charged with manslaughter and bodily harm. However, Deutsche Bahn was not among the defendants, because in Germany, criminal liability applies only to individuals, not companies. In court, the 2 engineers expressed grievance and indignation. They claimed to have inspected the wheels according to regulations. As for why the wheels fractured, they claimed it was unpredictable. Moreover, they argued they couldn't influence company decisions. Wheel maintenance and replacement required company approval. They had no authority to intervene. 8 months later, the trial concluded amidst public controversy. Ultimately, no one was convicted. The court fined each of the 3 men €10,000. The victims' families expressed their dissatisfaction. Upon hearing the verdict, such a tragic accident, 101 lives lost, yet no one was held accountable. After the trial in 2003, apart from the severely damaged carriages being scrapped, the usable carriages were put back into service. The survivors expressed disappointment with the verdict. Dittman, one of the survivors, said in an interview that he was disillusioned with the German legal system. No one paid the price for the accident. Everyone was shirking responsibility. Deutsche Bahn subsequently paid €30,000 in compensation to each survivor and the families of the deceased. Sadly, however, no amount of money could bring back the lost lives. Many children lost their parents in the accident and became orphans. For the survivors, the disaster altered the course of their lives. Boch was in a coma for 17 days. Upon waking, a reporter asked him about his experience. He said he was crushed by a seat, unable to breathe from the pain. He eventually lost consciousness. He woke up in the hospital. The accident left him permanently disabled and unable to work. Police officer Effingussen visited Boch. Boch was deeply moved because Effingussen had saved his life. 3 years after the accident, Boch had a daughter. This gave him a reason to live. Boch used his savings to build a small memorial to commemorate his survival. Although the memorial is small, it receives thousands of visitors every year. Survivor Schaffline's leg tendons were completely severed. Although she can walk normally after treatment, she suffers from lasting effects. She experiences lingering pain daily, which significantly impacts her life. The memory of the horrific accident still terrifies her. A memorial was later built in Eschede, the site of the accident. A monument was also erected near the new highway, inscribed with the details of the incident and the names of the 101 victims. 101 cherry trees were planted around the memorial, representing the 101 lost lives. Every June, bright red cherries adorn the branches. The Carl family, who live near the site, never moved. They believe that confronting the disaster helps them understand the true meaning of life and cherish the present. May every journey be safe.